Okay, let's take a look at example 17. Now, in example 17, the question is phrased slightly different. So in this case, they're looking for the maximum and the minimum values of this. Now, what happens is that we're going to rewrite this using our formula. We're going to change it into a single trigonometric term. So I'm going to start off by letting, okay, so if I'm going to let 2 sine x plus cosine x, okay, equals to r. So since it's sine, so this will be sine. And then remember, for sine we follow. So this will be theta plus alpha. Okay, now the question is given in degrees. So I'm going to find r 2 square plus 1 square, and that gives me square root 5. And then after that, for tangent alpha, it will be 1 over 2 in degrees. So your alpha will be 26.565. Okay, now with this I can now tell you, we rewrite 2 sine x, therefore 2 sine x plus cosine x is basically square root 5 sine theta plus 26.6 degrees, right? This is the final answer for this. Okay, now what happens is that the question is now asking for maximum and minimum values. Now with a single trigonometric term, we can actually relate this to our sine graph because this is sine, right? So if I were to draw a sine graph, y equals to sine x, we all know that the maximum is 1 and the minimum is minus 1, and this happens at 90 degrees and minimum happens at 270 degrees, right? So what happens if I draw a graph that is 3 sine x? My graph will still look like that, okay, right? And the maximum will still happen at 90 degrees and minimum will happen at 270 degrees, but my maximum value will now become 3 and my minimum value will now become minus 3. So with that, okay, if I were to change 3, instead of 3 sine x, if I were to change it to say square root 5 sine x, then the maximum will happen at maximum will happen at square root 5 and minimum will happen at negative square root 5. Now note, the angle is x. Maximum will happen at 90 degrees, correct? So now I'm going to relate it to this question. My angle is not x, my angle is this whole thing. But for this thing, for this value to happen at maximum, right? So we know that the maximum value will have to be square root 5. And when does this happen? When your angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so I got to equate this to 90 degrees. Now since this is not my final answer, I'm going to give a bit more significant, more decimal places. Then from there, I can work out my theta. So likewise, minimum value will happen in this case at negative square root 5, okay, when my angle is at 270 for sine. So when the question asks you for maximum or minimum, it's always good for you to draw out your sine graph or your cosine graph depending on your expression, whether it's r sine or r cosine, okay? And you take note that when I write maximum, minimum, as well as the corresponding angle, I write everything in one line, followed by solving the angle. So this is how you will then answer a question that asks for maximum and minimum values, as well as the corresponding angles of x, okay, the values of x. Right, let's take a look at the next example. Now for practice 9, if you take a look at practice 9, I am going to take a look at B, because so far we have been talking about our formula for sine cosine, but in this question you are given an additional minus 2. So what should I do about it? So for B, what you can do, you basically just let 4 sine x plus 3 cosine x minus 2 equal, your focus will still be here first, so that will give you your r sine, because the first term is sine. So theta, or no, this one is no longer theta because the angle is given as x, so I will have to follow and use x my plus alpha, and then the minus 2, right? This minus 2 I'll just copy behind like that. Okay, then I'm gonna just solve as usual. I'm gonna find my r. My r is basically 4 square plus 3 square, and in this case this is 5, right? And then after that, tangent alpha is 3 over 4, and therefore you're going to work out your alpha. Okay, so you're going to take a calculator. This is in degree mode, so change it to make sure your calculator is in degree mode, and then you're going to solve your alpha, and your alpha in this case would be your 36.87. Okay, now once you have this, then you can answer the question. Just remove this. Equal. So therefore 4 sine x plus 3 cosine x minus 2 is equals to 5 sine bracket x plus 36.87 minus 2. Okay, now then what is the maximum and the minimum? So this is a sine, so you can do a quick graph of a sine graph to know where the maximum and the minimum happen. Okay, so the maximum value in this case for this question is no longer just 5, but 5 minus 2. So that will give you your 3, and this happened when your angle is not just x. Your angle in this case is your x plus 36.87 gives you your 90. So your x, and do your calculation. Okay, that will give you your 53.1. Okay, as for minimum, we know that minimum happens at minus 5, but for this case I just have to minus 2. So minimum happens at minus 7 when your angle is at 270. So you can take a calculation, you get 233.1 degrees. Okay, so this is how you answer practice 9 part B. Now if you are given a question that is on cosine, then you just simply draw a cosine graph and determine where's the maximum and the minimum. So in this case, the maximum happens at 0 or 360, and the minimum happens at 180 degrees. So for maximum, it's 0 or 360. How do I know? Should I use 0 or should I use 360? It all depends on your domain. Okay?